Yes!
Aside from battling, one of the most enjoyable aspects of the core series Pokemon games is watching your Pokemon start off as a smaller, less powerful creature and end up as an older, more powerful version of itself by the time it reaches the final stage in its evolutionary line. This is even more apparent when it comes to your starter Pokemon, because this is the first companion that joins your team, and watching them become more powerful over time is always a great experience. Unfortunately, it is impossible to experience this with every Pokemon, due to the fact that a huge chunk of them don't evolve. Most legendaries and or mythicals and ultra beasts, for the exception of Poipo, aren't capable of evolving, but there exist regular Pokemon who don't belong to any of the aforementioned categories that are also incapable of evolution. Of course, there have been instances where Pokemon were originally released as single stage, but eventually received an evolved form later on. Examples consisting of, but not limited to, Scyther's evolved form Scizor, which was introduced in Gen 2, and Yanma's evolved form Yanmega, which was introduced in Gen 4. For the longest time, I wasn't a fan of single stage Pokemon because, as stated previously, the magic and excitement of evolution is impossible with them, and I've always been disinterested in non-evolving Pokemon and never once used one of them on any of my teams in any of the core series games until I got around to completing the main story of Pokemon Y in February of 2021. I know I'm late, but give me a break. Anyways, over the past couple of months, I started to give single stage Pokemon more of a chance and realized that several of them are pretty strong and viable. So I decided to see how far my affinity for single stage Pokemon could go by picking one from each generation that I personally feel is the best. This list is only in generational order only, so keep in mind that just because I'm starting off with Gen 1 doesn't mean that I like the Pokemon I picked in Gen 8 the least. So yeah, let's go ahead and get it in. For Gen 1, I decided to go with Kangaskhan. My original pick would have been, and back in Gen 1 was Scyther, but as we all know, Scizor made his debut in Gen 2 as Scyther's evolved form. But nonetheless, I've always been a fan of Kangaskhan for multiple reasons. The main reason is because it seems to share a similar design origin with other reptilian Gen 1 Pokemon such as Rhydon, Nidoking, and Nidoqueen. They all look vaguely reminiscent of each other, and they all have that retro look that will give you the realization that they're classic Pokemon even if you didn't know what generation they're from. I can't really explain it, but Gen 1 Pokemon have a design style that hasn't been used in the past several generations. But yeah, Kangaskhan has always been interesting because nothing about it makes sense at all. As stated previously, it's a reptilian Pokemon, but it also has a pouch like a marsupial, most specifically a kangaroo, which is referenced in its name. But the most odd attribute that Kangaskhan has is the fact that the baby it carries in its pouch isn't its pre-evolved form like you would think. It's literally a baby Kangaskhan, and as far as I'm concerned, this very strange attribute doesn't apply to any other Pokemon in the entire series. For example, Pichu is a baby Pokemon that evolves into Pikachu, meaning that it's the baby version of Pikachu, no differently than Azuro evolving into Meryl, because that's how Pokemon evolution works. The first stage of an evolutionary line is the most adolescent and won't reach peak maturity until it evolves into its final form. This is even more evident with starter Pokemon and other Pokemon belonging to a 3-stage evolutionary line, and it's no differently than us as humans starting off as small children and eventually growing up into adults. But Kangaskhan is a single stage Pokemon that is at one point in time a small purple dinosaur looking thing and eventually becomes a giant brown reptilian dinosaur with a pouch, and the only reason why this doesn't count as evolution is because the baby Kangaskhan isn't considered to be a separate species of Pokemon? I don't know. Despite the fact that the baby and adult versions of Kangaskhan have very evident design differences, and it's to the point where if you weren't familiar with Kangaskhan at all, it would be more than fair to assume that the baby is its pre-evolved form. And again, if all the aforementioned aspects apply to any other Pokemon, it would be another example of an evolved form and a pre-evolved form. But if the baby Kangaskhan was a separate species baby Pokemon that evolved into Kangaskhan, it would probably be called Kangaskid or something along those lines. I don't know. And despite the fact that there's never been a confirmed pre-evolution for Kangaskhan that was scrapped and or never made it into the final version of one of the main series games, I refuse to believe that Game Freak never once contemplated on making baby Kangaskhan its own separate Pokemon. The baby Kangaskhan didn't receive any actual relevancy until Mega Evolutions made their debut in Gen 6. In its Mega form, Kangaskhan baby grows up and fights alongside his mother. Mega Kangaskhan's signature ability is known as Parental Bond, and it turns most damaging attacks into 2-strike moves, the second hit being inflicted by the baby. Parental Bond is one of the most powerful abilities in the main series games and gave Kangaskhan a lot of competitive viability. It's hard to believe that Kangaskhan has all these amazing attributes and it's a normal type Pokemon. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but when I think of normal, words along the lines of plain, vanilla, and boring come to mind, but none of these apply to Kangaskhan. I also want to add that during the time that I started writing the script for this video, I had never actually trained or used a Kangaskhan in any of the Pokemon games. As a matter of fact, I don't even remember the last time I even caught one, but my affinity for this Pokemon skyrocketed when I found out how utterly broken its Mega form is. I was in the process of collecting all the ribbons in Omega Ruby until I found myself undergoing the most brutal trial and error in the Battle Mason. The goal here was to obtain the Expert Battler ribbon, and Kangaskhan was the backbone and the bread and butter of my entire team. At the time, I couldn't manage to get past 41 wins in Super Singles, but when I switched over to Super Doubles, Kangaskhan, alongside Greninja, made mincemeat of the entire 49 battles before Evelyn, the Battle Shadow Lane of the Battle Mason's doubles and Super Doubles format. Power Up Punch followed by Return, with Max Happiness made the Super Doubles a walk in the park. And when I made it to Evelyn herself, Kangaskhan and Greninja made a mockery out of her entire team because I didn't lose a single Pokemon during the entire fight. Then, later on, I turned around and used the same exact team as Sun versus Battle Tree Doubles and made it all the way to 50 battles in a row without ever losing and defeated Battle Legend Blue. So needless to say, Kangaskhan is a savage. My favorite single stage Gen 2 Pokemon has gotta be Heracross. Back in the OG Gold and Silver days, Heracross was actually a part of my team of 6 before I realized how counterintuitive it was to have 2 bug types on my team. The other one was Scizor, which shouldn't be much of a surprise due to the earlier mention of Scyther being my original favorite single stage Pokemon from Gen 1. Heracross has always been special to me because it's the first bug fighting type, a type combination that was exclusive to it until Gen 7 when Buzzwole and Ferozma made their debut, which was an entire 5 generations later. Fighting is one of my favorite Pokemon types, and the fact that Game Freak was able to give us a bug Pokemon who was also a fighting type and has amazing cosmetics and stats was done so amazingly. Heracross's fighting type pays homage to the insect that it's based off of, the Japanese Rhinoceros Beetle, which are commonly used in insect fighting. I wanted to mention that I don't care for bugs in real life at all, but I gotta be real when I say that the Rhinoceros Beetle is one of the coolest looking bugs I've ever seen. And a decent amount of my affinity for Heracross might derive from his depiction in the anime as well, because now that I think about it, Ash had a Heracross back in the day, and it's a very common occurrence to become affined to a Pokemon after seeing it in the anime, especially as a kid. The Johto era of the anime came out when I was about 9 or 10 years old, and I never forget how much of a beast Ash's Heracross was. Ash used Heracross in a Johto League against Gary's Magmar and was able to withstand 2 back-to-back fire attacks, one of them being a Fire Blast tackle combo where Magmar engulfed his entire body with flames and had Heracross pinned against a rock until Heracross broke free and beat Magmar with a Mega Horn attack. Of course, this was a prime example of anime plot armor because we all know that wouldn't have happened in the games. And when Mega Evolutions made their debut in Gen 6, it didn't surprise me at all that Heracross was one of the lucky Pokemon to get one. Now, I don't know how anybody else feels about Mega Heracross, but I personally think it's definitely one of the best designed Mega Evolutions out of any of them. Many members of the Pokemon community would have preferred if Heracross received the conventional evolved form instead, and I agree with that to some extent, but from my point of view, Heracross's Mega form is the best of both worlds, because to me, it looks like a Mega form and an evolved form at the same time. And the fact that it looks so entirely differently than Heracross, but similarly enough to the point where you could tell that it's still related to Heracross in some way, is one of the main reasons why I said that Mega Heracross has one of the best designs out of all of the Mega Evolutions. It's also been stated that Mega Heracross looks like a Digimon, and I agree with that too because I always get some serious Metal Cobble's Harrymon vibes when I look at Mega Heracross. For Gen 3, I'm gonna have to go with Absol. Now, including Absol, Gen 3 has more single stage Pokemon than any other generation, at about 18 if I'm not mistaken. So you would think that picking the best one would be a difficult task. Well, it actually wasn't, because aside from Seviper, Zangoose, Tropius, Mawile, and Sableye, Generation 3's standalone Pokemon were never all that appealing to me. Like Absol, Mawile and Sableye were given Mega Evolutions in Gen 6, but I'm still sticking to the conjecture that Absol is the best single stage Pokemon from Gen 3. This Pokemon has some of the most interesting lore, and is referred to as the Disaster Pokemon because it has the ability to predict when a disaster is going to occur. This led Absol to being hated by humanity and blamed for the arrival of disasters, which is why Absol lives in mountains far away from humankind. Cosmetically, Absol looks amazing. Its monochromatic color scheme does an impeccable job of paying homage to its duality of darkness and light. This is made even more apparent by its Mega form, which looks angelic but still maintains its somewhat wicked appearance. Based on how rare Absol is, alongside its incredibly unique aesthetics and lore, it wouldn't surprise me if it was originally meant to be legendary. I mean, aside from the stats, it has all the prerequisites to be a legendary Pokemon. My most fond memory of Absol came about when I was just a kid, back when Ruby and Sapphire were fairly new. Back then, I used to take my Game Boy Advance with me everywhere I went. And one day I was at a restaurant with some relatives when my aunt asked to play my Game Boy Advance, which I was fine with since I wasn't really doing anything important. At the time, all I was doing is running around Route 120 battling wild Pokemon to level up my team. Now within the first couple of seconds of my aunt playing, the first Pokemon that she ran into was an Absol, which was something that I unfortunately wasn't able to do. Back in Gen 3, Absol could only be found on Route 120 and literally nowhere else in the game, and it had an 8% encounter rate. As a child, I didn't know anything about encounter likelihood or anything along the lines of such, but I knew that Absol was rare because I was never able to run into one myself. I gotta go with Rotom for Gen 4, and there's multiple reasons why. First off, Rotom is an absolutely ingenious Pokemon by concept alone. Its body is composed entirely of plasma, which enables it to possess and fuse with anything electronic, and when this happens in the games, its ghost typing changes depending on whatever household appliance it possesses. This ability has given Rotom 5 additional forms in the games, consisting of Heat Rotom, which is electric and fire, Wash Rotom, which is electric and water, Frost Rotom, electric ice, Fan Rotom, electric flying, and Mow Rotom, electric grass. And if you weren't already aware, the typing for Heat Rotom, Mow Rotom, and Base Form Rotom isn't shared with any other Pokemon at all. Frost Rotom was also a unique typing holder prior to Gen 8, which is when Arctozolt made its debut. Now back in the Gen 4 games, you can only find one Rotom in the entire game by visiting a vacant location known as the Old Chateau and approaching the TV in one of the rooms. Afterwards, Rotom will pop out of the TV and battle you. Now this occurrence itself wasn't anything to write home about, but the fact that Rotom was given legendary Pokemon battle theme music for his encounter was, and because it is, it would make perfect sense to think that Rotom was a legendary. I would have thought the same thing if I already wasn't informed of who the legendary Pokemon in Generation 4 were, and solely due to the fact that Rotom has such a unique encounter back then in Gen 4, I wouldn't be surprised if it was originally meant to be legendary, no differently than Absol that we spoke of previously. Rotom received a resurgence of popularity and or recognition when the Generation 7 era anime and games were released. Rotom is able to fuse with the Pokédex, which brings existence to the Rotom Dex. The Rotom Dex is vastly superior to the conventional Pokédex because it gives actual sentience to the Pokédex instead of simply being a talking Pokemon bestiary. In Gen 8, the Rotom phone replaced the Rotom Dex after Rotom possessed a smartphone, which pays direct homage to the fact that smartphones are one of the most important and commonly used tools in everyday life in the modern world. This was incredibly useful in the games because in Gen 7, if you lost your sense of direction, you could simply tap the DS's bottom screen and Rotom will remind you of what you're supposed to do next. Since it's relatively easy to get lost in the Pokemon games, this was a feature that I really enjoyed in Gen 7. Now in Gen 8, Rotom can also possess your bike and enable you to ride over water, which was an amazing way to replace the Surf HM from the previous games. It's safe to say that Rotom will maintain a canonical role in the anime and games due to how much better it made the Pokédex, and I'm excited to see what else it'll do in future titles. Druddigon has always been a strange but very interesting Pokemon to me. For one, it's the first non-legendary single-stage dragon-type Pokemon. This means that every non-legendary dragon from generations 1 to 4 all belong to an evolutionary line. And with that being stated, Druddigon is a literal precedent setter because generations 7 and 8 also introduced a non-legendary single-stage dragon-type Pokemon of their own. But to this day, Druddigon is the only non-legendary single-stage pure dragon type, as the others have a second typing. But yeah, I've always been a fan of Druddigon because it looks so powerful and intimidating. Druddigon looks like he trains his body by crushing rocks with his teeth and claws, and his scales became harder than steel as a result. Which might be the case considering the fact that Druddigon's base defense and special defense stats are both 90, which is pretty solid. Hallucia easily became a favorite of mine, solely based on its design and name origin alone, without even factoring in its competitive viability or battle prowess as a whole. The name Hallucia itself is a portmanteau of Hawk and Lucha Libre. Now I'm pretty sure you know what a Hawk is, but the word Lucha Libre is basically freestyle wrestling in Spanish, and wrestlers in Latin culture commonly wear masks as a part of their wrestling attire. No, not that type of mask. This type of mask. And when you take this into account, it's easy to see that Hallucia's face is inspired by Lucha Libre's mask. I love it when real world references are integrated into a Pokemon's design seamlessly enough to the point where it's subtle, but you can still get an idea of what it's based on, and Hallucia pulls that off flawlessly. Hallucia is also a literal precedent setter in the Pokemon world, being the very first fighting and flying type Pokemon to ever exist, and it exclusively held this title until Galarian Zapdos was introduced 2 generations later. Adding to its uniqueness, Hallucia is the only Pokemon capable of learning the move known as Flying Press, its signature move, and it deals fighting and flying type damage at the same time. Now I'm a huge fan of attack moves that divagate away from the simplistic expectation of doing one particular thing, such as fire attacks having a chance to inflict burn and electric attacks causing paralysis. Now we have Scald, a water attack that can burn, and Galarian Articuno's signature move, Freezing Glare, a psychic type attack that can freeze opponents. And if you've been playing the Pokemon games since the earlier generations, it's no secret that attack moves have come a very long way. But back to it. Hallucia is actually the first single stage Pokemon that I've ever used on any of my teams throughout the years, because the Gen 6 games are the most recent titles that I've played and beaten. Now, I couldn't get into X and Y when they first released back in 2013, but I eventually revisited Y version in late 2020 and decided to throw Hallucia into the roster, which was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made in the game. Its base stat total of 500 is pretty solid, and its main selling point would be its base speed stat of 118, which is actually better than a handful of fully evolved starter Pokemon. I don't usually get too hyped up over single stage Pokemon, but Hallucia is one of, if not the most unique of them all. Generation 7 brought us Tertinator, a Pokemon I quickly became a fan of for multiple reasons. Before I knew Tertinator existed, I was super excited for Sun and Moon to release, but after I saw the entire Gen 7 Pokedex, I became a huge fan of Tertinator. For those of you that weren't aware, Tertinator is based on the Mata turtle, a South American freshwater turtle that has a long neck, a flat head, and a long snout. Now, when you look at a picture of Tertinator and a Mata turtle side by side, it's incredibly easy to see the resemblance. Tertinator's fire dragon typing is a fantastic combo, only being weak to rock, ground, and dragon. Originally, the legendary Pokemon Reshiram was the only Pokemon to have this type combination, and I really liked Reshiram because of that. So when I found out that the second fire dragon Pokemon wasn't legendary, I was pretty excited. Oh, and another thing, my affinity for Tertinator grew even stronger after seeing it in the Sun and Moon arc of the anime. In the anime, Kiawe's ace Pokemon is a Tertinator, and I always think that it's pretty cool when a character's ace is a single stage Pokemon. Also, I can't count how many times I've watched a battle between Kiawe's Tertinator and Brock's Mega Steelix. That was a super dope battle. And last but not least, the most impressive single stage Pokemon introduced in Generation 8 has to be Doraleoudon. Similar to the aforementioned Tertinator, Doraleoudon's Steel Dragon typing was originally exclusive to a legendary Pokemon, being Dialga. This means that Doraleoudon's only weak to ground and fighting, which is amazing because its Steel typing completely negates all of the weaknesses of its Dragon typing. Doraleoudon was one of the first Gen 8 Pokemon to be revealed prior to the release of Sword and Shield, alongside Alcremie, Roly-Coly, and Yamper, and when I first saw it, I was 100% certain that it would be the pseudo-legendary of the Gen 8 games. I mean, I feel that this is a relatable assumption because Doraleoudon looks like it would be the final form of a 3-stage evolutionary line. But when it was revealed that Dragapult would be the pseudo-legendary of Gen 8 and Doraleoudon was a single-stage Pokemon, I still maintained affinity for it. I was happy to find out that Doraleoudon was given a Gigantamax form, stated to be based on the Shard, the tallest building in the UK, which makes sense because the UK is where the Galar region draws inspiration from. Now, aside from being a non-legendary, single-stage dragon type, Doraleoudon also shares another attribute with Tertinator in the sense that both are the ace Pokemon of a character in the anime. Doraleoudon is the ace Pokemon of Raihan, the dragon-type specialist gym leader in the Galar region. Now, in the games, Doraleoudon's base stat total of 535 is incredible, and if I'm not mistaken, this might be the highest base stat total of any non-legendary, non-Ultra Beast single-stage Pokemon to date. Doraleoudon's base stat total is higher than every fully evolved starter Pokemon, for the exception of Swampert, who also has a base stat total of 535. So yeah, Doraleoudon has a lot going for it. Even if I wasn't aware of any of Doraleoudon's battle stats or competitive value, I would still be a fan of it based on cosmetics alone. Well, everybody, that does it for this one. I really hope you enjoyed this video. In the comment section, tell me who your favorite single stage Pokemon is, as well as why you adore it so much. Now, if you made it to the end of this video and you enjoyed what you watched, do me a favor and thumb right to that like button until it turns blue. And if you're new to my neck of the woods, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and click that bell icon so you don't ever miss a video of the most elite gaming content. But with that being stated, 1LHD is over and out. Y'all take it easy.